and we're really delighted that we have Kate Fraser from Women in Prison joining us as we mark International Women's Day. This particular International Women's Day is obviously a big one for the Digital Poverty Alliance, as the focus that the UN have set is around innovation and technology for gender equality. And I quote from their announcement a couple of months ago when they were talking about this being the theme, when they say that advancements in digital technology offer immense opportunities to address development and humanitarian challenges and to achieve the 2030 Agenda's Sustainable Development Goals. However, digital poverty remains a massive issue across the UK, across the world, but even across the UK, with around 14 million people continuing to have very low levels of digital engagement. And we're going to be talking to Kate a little bit about what that means, particularly for women who have experienced or are at risk of experiencing the criminal justice system. For those of you who don't already know who the DPA are, just really quickly, we are a charitable coalition bringing together government, whether that's local or national, business, whether that's big or small, and charities, whether that's national or community-led, to end digital poverty once and for all by the end of the decade. That's our very ambitious. We do this through convening people, we do this through advocacy, we do this through research, and we also do this through helping real people who need support right now, who can't wait for those big societal changes. If you want to find out more about us, do visit digitalpovertyalliance.org, but not before we've heard from our fantastic guest today. Kate, can I ask you to introduce yourself and what Women in Prison do?
Hi, yes. So thank you so much for inviting me today. And what a day to be doing it. International Women's Day just seems right, doesn't it? So, yeah, my name is Kate Fraser. I am the head of prison partnerships and participation for Women in Prison. I've been with the organisation about 10 or 11 years now. And I have lived experience of the criminal justice system as well. So what we do is we're a national charity. We are in our 40th year this year, have our 40th anniversary. We were set up by a woman called Chris Tchaikovsky after she spent some time in Holloway Prison in the 80s. And we deliver support for women who are affected by the criminal justice system. And that could be in prisons, in the community, through our women's centres. And we kind of have a dual role, really. So we have some service delivery, as I say, in prisons and women's centres and in the community, but we also campaign to end that very real harm that's caused to women, their families, and our communities by imprisonment.
Thank you, Kate, and really delighted that you're here to join us today on IWD 2023. We're going to jump into some questions, but if you are in the audience and you're watching this and you've got a burning question, please do use the Q&A function to start lining those up. Please do also use the webinar chat to say who you are, geographically, where you are today, and a little bit about who you are, maybe what your role is or why you've come along. It'd be great to see a really active chat running today. So Kate, you've explained a little bit about women in prison and where the charity came from. How do you feel that the charity is able to empower women who are leaving prison or at risk of offending?
Okay, I always find empower a strange word, really, because I always wonder, can you actually empower somebody? Is it possible to do that? Or is it kind of just sort of possible to support people or give them agency? But I suppose the answer is twofold, really. So within our service delivery, we work holistically with women. So we work in a trauma responsive way and in a way that's women led, really. So we work as independent advocates for women. So it's not about doing for women. It's about working with the woman, recognizing and encouraging her own strengths to really kind of make those positive changes, which will hopefully will lead that woman away from the criminal justice system and into making more positive choices in her life. I suppose on the campaigning side, we offer a platform for women's voices, and that can build women's confidence and their self-belief. It can strengthen their understanding of their rights and responsibilities, and can really provide those opportunities to speak truth to power and hopefully to bring about that real change that's needed.
That's fantastic. And I think that speaking truth to power that won't be needed forever, but it is incredibly important, particularly at the moment. I understand that women's circumstances and experiences around offending can be quite different to what you might consider the general or typical prison population. Is that right? How does that look?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Elizabeth. I mean, women who are in contact with the criminal justice system, that could be prison or probation, have really frequently experienced some form of trauma and abuse, both as children and as adults, which could often lead to poor mental health, drug and alcohol addiction, poverty, homelessness, unstable relationships. The list goes on, really. And these are usually the root causes of women's offending and are often made worse whilst in prison. It's really clear to us within our service delivery that many of the sort of symptoms and presenting problems that bring women into touch with our services really have their roots in those prior experiences of trauma, abuse, and neglect. And what we find is, in a way, that women are quite often sort of doubly punished in a way, particularly around imprisonment, that men aren't. So women are more likely than men to be the sole or primary carer for their children. And in I think it's about 95 cases, when a mum goes to prison, her children would need to leave their home to go into care or to live with relatives. I think it's about 18,000 kids a year are separated from mum because of mum going to prison. About 2/3 of women in prison report experiencing some form of domestic abuse, and 1/3 have been in the care system at some point in their childhood. And that then is all kind of compounded, all those sort of very deep, complex needs are all compounded by the impact that prison itself has on women, because women only make up 5% of the prison population, about 10 to 15% of the probation caseload. So just a very typical example is that there's only 12 women's prisons in the UK. So that means that women are often imprisoned further away from home. The average distance for a woman from home to prison is usually about 65 miles, and for 20% of those women it's about 150 miles away. We don't have a women's prison in Wales, so if you're in prison, if you committed a crime in Wales, you'll either go to a prison down south or in Cheshire, so real issues with trying to keep families together. So yeah, the short answer is yes, Elizabeth. Lots of differences between men and women, and because women make up that small proportion, they are often overlooked, and their needs are overlooked within that system as well.
I mean, that is just basically horrifying. And I think the types of crimes that are committed are quite different as well. I believe that you don't tend to see violent crimes on the whole.
Yes. Yeah, around about 81% of women are in prison for non-violent offences, and then women are disproportionately sentenced for certain crimes. So women, non-payment of council tax would be one, not having a television licence would be another one, and children not attending the school. So those are crimes for which women are disproportionately sentenced, and that's often because mum either is the primary carer or the tenancy will be in her name. So women go to prison for non-payment of council tax for not having a television licence. That's really an imprisonment for poverty, really, I always think. So lots of differences. Women are being remanded in much bigger numbers. So remand being women being in, have been arrested and charged but haven't been convicted, so are technically still innocent. So larger numbers of women being remanded for longer periods of time, who actually then may only go on to receive a custodial sentence of a couple of weeks. So it's kind of a crazy system, and it's one that's quite hidden because most people don't know anybody who's been to prison. Why would you? So some big issues there.
It really is, and I think that's a really important backdrop as we start to consider what digital access means, particularly, as you say, some of these is putting a sentence against poverty, which seems incredibly unfair from where I sit. I mean, the pandemic, of course, had a massive impact on how services and organisations operate. What did digital access in the UK prison system look like before the pandemic, and how has COVID affected that digitisation?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and I think lots of people have this idea that that prisons are all uniform and that what happens in one prison is definitely happening in another. That's not the case. So often there's some really good areas of good practice in some prisons in some parts of the country, and in other areas there isn't really. I mean, Her Majesty's, or His Majesty's now, actually, His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service have their own, I think it's a snappily named digital data and technology strategy, and that kind of it outlines their long-term vision on what it expects to be implementing up to sort of 2024. I mean, I think there haven't been great strides pre-pandemic. You know, there were some very good areas of practice around sort of access to technology as far as education was concerned. So lots of things with kind of virtual universities and things like that going on. And there was a push during pandemic, and you can imagine the issues of that, trying to do that during the pandemic, sort of around 21, 22, to kind of really roll out this program. It's interesting because a huge part of it was to sort of upgrade their end user technology for back office staff and correctional staff in their division, looking at kind of connectivity and cost effectiveness. So a lot of really, really good stuff going on for staff who work in prisons, but less kind of useful for people in prisons as prisoners. But there was a huge aspect of that, which was kind of offering some of those enhanced digital tools to people in prison. For example, they procured new video calling software. Obviously, nobody could have a physical visit during the pandemic, but they did roll out this software. And also, there were plans to roll out access to laptops and tablets across, I think it was 9 different prisons across the UK.
There were plans. Did the plans happen? What is that current situation looking like?
Well, that's the $6 million question, isn't it? I think it's fair to say they are still rolling out that pilot. So I know that in Style Prison in Cheshire, which is a prison where I do some work from, every single woman in that program in that prison does have access to a laptop. And I think Newhall, which is another women's prison, they've got access to laptops. I certainly know it's not like that in other prisons across the country. So we're getting there, but we're not there all the way yet. The video conferencing that did go out, and that was it sounds fairly simple, doesn't it? Just video conferencing, it's a no-brainer during COVID, but that was really, really kind of essential for women, because if you think during COVID, all of the things that that help people's sort of mental health and help them to keep in touch with their families and just help them in that journey for prison. So education, work, visits from different organisations, appointments with counselling, all of that went. And self-harm really rocketed in women's prisons, and it's now still at a kind of all-time high. I mean, if we think that, like I say, women only make up 5% of the prison population, but every day there are more than 50 incidents of self-harm in women's prisons, and the rate of self-harm in women's prisons is 8 times higher than in men's prisons. So it was really hoped that that kind of digitally centered approach for rehabilitation was expected to produce these really positive outcomes, not just on recidivism, but also mental health in prisons.
Yes, and I mean, you've talked about that that double punishment with children going into care and the incredible impact on families. So you can well imagine just how distressed women must be once they're into the system. You, of course, run women's centres. How has the pandemic affected that for what you offer?
Yeah, I think it's been a learning curve for all of us, really. I think we had to make a really quick move towards that, to that rapid digital mobilizations. We are, I think, like most charities, doing face-to-face work with people. That's what we do. That's what we're really good at. That face-to-face work is really integral to what we do in building that trust and that sense of collaboration and choice. And suddenly, the ability to be able to do that was taken away from us. So I think for our staff teams, it was a real kind of mental and psychological shift to being able to support people online. So being able to offer one-to-one support over the telephone, online, making sure that women could do that. So having to put in lots of kind of grant applications and look for sort of organisations like yourselves who were able to support women to be able to get those devices out to them so that they could access support. we had to look at different ways of delivering in terms of how do you read the room, you know, if you're delivering a workshop around domestic violence, you know, when it's much harder to kind of pick up on a vibe or the kind of nuance of what's going on. You know, being able to pick up on people's body language is a little bit more difficult when you're doing that in a kind of an online sort of virtual forum. So I think it was a learning curve for us, a massive learning curve for us, but it also opened up different possibilities. So post-pandemic now, when our centres are completely open again and group works and workshops are running, we've still got a hybrid system in place. So there are women who actually prefer to access virtually, you know, via tablets, rather than making that trek, you know, to a woman's centre. You know, it might work in better for them in terms of school times when they've got to pick the kids up, or, you know, if they need to go and access daily medication. Sometimes people have to pick up methadone on a daily pickup, and they do that in the morning. And so some of those things have worked really, really well for us. But I think it's fair to say, yeah, the pandemic did really affect the way that we run the women's centres and how we deliver our services. And quite often, it's not just giving a woman a device, it's teaching that woman how to use that device. So that, I think that's the key to it, really, making sure that that support is in place, because otherwise somebody's just got a device that they don't know how to use and still excluded, aren't they, really, Elizabeth? So
definitely, and that's something at the DPA we feel really strongly about. We talk about there being 5 determinants of digital poverty, and actually the device and the connectivity, which is indeed that first hurdle. If you don't have the machine, you can't. But that's only actually one element. We then talk about user-centered design. We talk about the skills to be able to use it. We talk about the motivation to be able to use it, and actually understanding what that can do for you. If you've never had access to the internet, how can you ever conceive all of the opportunities it might be able to give? And even just that technical support. How often have I wanted to throw my laptop out the window if you've never used it before? You need somebody who can actually help you to get the best out of it. We did, of course, from the DPA, provide a small number of machines to women in prison. What kind of impact has that had?
Just, you know, it's great, really. You know, they were given to clients to help support a lot with kind of areas around E2E, which we kind of thought was going to be the case, but also around social inclusion, really. So if we had clients who were really engaging and actually, going back to your point, could see the benefit of having that device, and that were able to help them achieve the goals that they themselves had set, then those women got those laptops, you know. So for us, you know, it was really good practice, because we're giving out laptops in accordance with what that woman's needs are. You know, we're not overwhelming them with something and saying, here's this, go away and learn how to use it. I think it's fair to say lots of women were really close to tears on receiving those laptops, because just having a laptop could help those women feel that they are able to, that they're in the game, and that it's going to elevate their chances of achieving, feeling that there's a whole sort of field out there that, you know, that you're not part of and that you're excluded from. I mean, I'm preaching to the converted here, aren't I? So, you know, it's that very real feeling before they've even logged on to it. I have had some feedback from some of the women who got those laptops, and I found out that it's enabled them to apply for jobs, for courses. Somebody's been able to complete a degree, so they were really struggling with completing their uni work, so that's really important to them. Other women have been able to connect with family members and kind of other significant others within their lives, and that's really helped with kind of social inclusion, particularly as well around people being able to access online workshops and support from other organisations. So it's been huge. You know, it's not just, here you are, off you trot, there's your laptop. It's been a massive change for some of those women.
It's absolutely fantastic to hear, Kate. And I think it can't be overemphasised, actually, how isolating it is not having access to that field, as you call it. And that sense of helplessness around not being able to reach these opportunities that you hear are there, but you can't see, you can't feel. There's no way of knowing what that looks like. So in any small way that we've been able to help those people, that is incredible. And hopefully maybe some people are sitting in our attendees feeling inspired as well to want to help. That, of course, is talking about providing support and that piece around motivation for some of your clients. But of course, women within prison, you've talked about how they may have access to laptops, but what kind of support are they able to access in terms of skills and understanding how to get the best out of those devices.
In prisons or in the community, or both?
In prison.
In prisons. I think it's really interesting. I work with a group in Style Prison every Friday. They're kind of guest editing a magazine with me, and it's our Women in Prison magazine, and I thought, it's great, let's really get those women involved. And actually very quickly we understood that, you know, there's no access to the internet, so they can't do any research for any of those stories. And we were talking about their laptops one day, and what actually transpired was that whilst there is, again, as I said before, good kind of access digitally for education, and that's a prison where every woman gets a laptop. So it's really good as part of her reception induction program. They give her a laptop, they give her a password and say, you know, here you go. Unless you're in a cell with somebody who knows how to use that computer, that laptop, it's really just a kind of metal box, isn't it? It's stuck on your shelf. So I think that's what we have found. And I don't think it's, you know, down to a lack of willingness for the prison service. What we're finding is that there is a real problem kind of with staffing in women's prisons, or possibly across the prison estate. But definitely we're seeing it in women's prisons. So just women being able to gain access, being able to get some of that support, getting from one side of the prison to another. So, you know, there may well be a digital workshop that's happening in your library where your prison librarian will show you how to do that. If you haven't got somebody, if you haven't got the staff on the ground to come in and lock you from your cell and to walk across and to walk you across to the library and put you in the library and then take you back again, it's not going to happen. So there's a lot of kind of very complicated sort of operational challenges that you get in prisons that you don't get in the community. So I think it's fair to say we've still got a bit of a way to go in prisons. I mean, that rollout hasn't happened across the board. And again, you know, where it has, it's really about trying to find that support. I really liked something that you said at the beginning, actually, where you talked about getting the right support to the people, to the right people at the right time. And that's kind of where we are with prisons. You know, you need to get the right support to the right people at the right time, otherwise people can become very disillusioned, can impact on people's self-esteem, you know, that kind of, I can never do it, that's something I can't do, you know, which really has a negative impact in people in terms of where they're looking for the future. So I think the short answer is we've still got a bit of a way to go, Elizabeth.
And I mean, it's actually, it is really good to hear that some of those first hurdles are being tackled. Devices, connection, but absolutely that the skills and the confidence and the motivation are absolutely fundamental. Yeah. I keep repeating those words, both because they are so important. On release, obviously, women in prison do great work, but what other support is there for people who perhaps are coming out of prison, want to build a new future and feel like digital is actually going to be crucial to that, or maybe they don't realise that digital is going to be crucial to that? What does that support landscape tend to look like?
I think it's been difficult since the pandemic. We saw a lot of organisations go to the wall, or in fact we saw organisations change their kind of thresholds for the criteria of that could access their services. So it tends to be people who are in much bigger crisis, but we all know that actually you need to support people. If you invest at the beginning before they hit that crisis, you'll be investing less at the end of that crisis. I mean, we've Women in Prison, we commissioned a report recently around women's centres, and what we found out that women's centres generate a nearly triple return on investment by keeping women out of prison and also easing demand for other services. So an average women's centre that receives about £1 million in a given year can support about 650 women and also generate, you know, nearly £3 million in public savings. And, you know, that all the time, you know, that's huge itself. But more importantly for those women, we know that women's centres are a lifeline for vital services and provide significant welfare gains for those women and their children. I suppose what we have seen in terms of other support, we've seen, as I say, less services, lots of funding going towards COVID and COVID relief, and a shift away from some of the areas that were previously being funded. And what I would say to anybody is, if anybody works in this field, find out where your local women's centre is. You know, find out what you can offer them, find out what they can offer you, because they really are hubs, you know, where women go, where they feel comfortable. If you're on probation now in certain areas of the country, you won't see your probation officer at a probation office. You'll see them at your local women's centre. And the idea being that probation can do the offender focused work, and that staff at women's centres can advocate for those women and look at those other areas in their life that possibly might have led them into the criminal justice system in the first place.
I think it's a really important call to action there. I'm down in Kent. I don't know where my local women's centre is, so I've written myself a little note to go. I should do that, and I hope everybody else is writing that down as well and going, we should all be looking that up. You talked earlier on as well about a lot of the kind of predisposing factors for why women get caught up in the criminal justice system. Do you feel, as well as evidently the benefits of getting online, that helps with training, it helps with education, it helps with finding a job, but do you believe that that digital access can also be more widely a road to build the social networks that might be needed to lift women and their families out of some of the other poverty they're experiencing?
Yeah, and I think it's survival. I think it's absolute survival. You know, we talk about, you know, people being hands and people having access to education or social networks. It's absolute survival, you know. So I think if you look at, you know, how women, how support is offered these days, you know, if you are coming out of prison, I'll give you a good example. I remember good few years back, doing a through the gate with a woman. So I'd been working with her in prison, picked her up at prison gate on the day of release, took her to accommodation that we would have been able to secure for her, you know, sorted out a gas and electricity, and she had a bank card that we'd sorted for her, and left feeling quite, you know, clever with myself, that managed to, you know, help this woman, support this woman this way, and went back on Monday and she was sitting in the dark, you know, fridge off, everything off, no light, no heat. And I said, what's going on? You know, what's happened here? And she said, I went into the shop, this is a good few years when I used to do online work, and she said, I know you'd given me that card, but they were doing something where they were putting numbers into a keyboard, and she was talking about chip and pin. Okay, and I hadn't explained what chip and pin was. She'd been in prison, chip and pin had come out when she'd been in prison, and she didn't know, so she sat in the dark because she didn't have anybody else to ask. If you look at women coming out of prison now, how do you get anywhere? If you go somewhere, you know, in London, definitely, I'm sure other parts of the country, you don't use cash to pay for your tube travel, your bus travel. You don't use cash for any of those things. So just women being able to understand that. Going through a supermarket self-service checkout, you know, working with women who are lifers, who've never done that before, who don't know what that's like. If you want to apply for housing, you're going to have to do it electronically. If you want to raise a complaint about any housing that you've got, you're going to have to raise a complaint electronically. So it's not just kind of that enhanced stuff, it's real survival, you know. And for people who, as I say, feel that they're out of that game, you know, and lack that motivation because the sport hasn't been there, it's huge, you know. I mean, the other stuff is, you know, that we've talked about, people being able to go to uni, complete courses, access workshops and things like that. But it's key, and I think people often think, oh, can't afford you know, people with no kind of concept. I'm sure not people here, but people have no concept of kind of, you know, the complex needs of women, and actually what that means to be not part of that, digitally excluded. It's a huge thing. It's survival. I can't, you know, might sound like I'm being dramatic, but that's the bottom line.
I couldn't agree with you more, and it's not dramatic. Growingly, everything we do is online, and whether that's good or whether that's bad, that actually is how people access services, whether it's education, whether it is complaints, whether it's that your bin hasn't been picked up. Yes. You know, all of these things you have to be able to get online to do. And one of the points that came through in our evidence review, which we released last year, is that digital has to be seen as access to digital has to be seen as a basic right now, in the way that you would see water as a basic right, you'd see access to heating as a basic right. You have to be able to get online, and you have to understand that. And I think that's such an interesting point, particularly with the speed that tech is evolving these days. If you've been in prison for 3 years, how would you be able to keep up with the modern landscape? How would you know how to use online forms? How would you know how to join Zoom? Kate, you've frozen on my screen. I'm going to turn to Ellie, who's sitting in the background, and see, oh no, Kate, you're back. That's good. That is good. Starting to panic there and go, oh, what do we do now? But yeah, would you be able to expand just a little bit on that point around particularly tech that's come out during the pandemic, and how you've started to see that really impacting women coming through your schemes?
Yeah, like I say, I mean, I think there's a real kind of issue around. There's a real issue for women who have longer prison sentences, because they just don't, you know, they're stuck in a place. If they did have any kind of digital skills, they stay in that place, you know. it doesn't enhance. And prison governors will often say, I remember speaking to a prison governor and we were talking about implementing applying for some funding for that prison, and he said, oh, don't give me any more money for those frequent flyers, you know what I mean, those people who are in out short-term women, who are often the most vulnerable with the most complex needs. And I said, why not? And he said, because they get money chucked at them. The people who don't get the money are the women who are doing perhaps longer sentences, who keep their head down, who just get on with stuff, get a job in the prison, but actually those skills stay where they are, from when they go into prison, which could be 2, 3, 4 years. And as you yourself said, 2 years is a huge amount of time, isn't it, in terms of technology and where we're going with that. I think similarly in the community, we find the same things. Possibly more around sort of operational things around people having the confidence around apply, as all those things that we talked about, applying for housing, just doing everything that's required in that digital world. We know that in terms of kind of recidivism, that there are 2 key factors that can really impact massively on people's people not reoffending, and those are around accommodation and employment. And both of those are really fields where you just need those digital skills and those access to resources, and still we're finding out that women don't have access to those, and lack the confidence, and quite often sort of even though there is a lot of stuff out there, often can be quite I think it's fair to say, like, probation officers are really male dominated, because there's more men on probation, 85% of the probation caseload. So actually just having the confidence to go into an arena, so perhaps they might do a job club or digital tech clubs, or perhaps your local authority does some of those. If you're talking about a group of women, a cohort of women that have experienced gender-based violence, that have experienced domestic abuse, let's do some gender-specific sessions for women. Not every woman will need that, but let's do some of those sessions so that women feel comfortable and feel in a safe environment. In fact, and if you're delivering some of those, go and deliver them from your local women's centre, or go and speak to your local women's centre about delivering those, because that's a centre where women already go. They access those centres, they feel safe in those centres, and that's what we're trying to do with these women's centres. Have them as a one-stop shop so people can come in and deliver their services in an environment where women feel safe.
Again, such an important point, and no shade to any men who are on this call, but I know how I feel. You actually have to be quite confident to say you don't know how to do something. Sure. And actually, as it's International Women's Day and we should all be sharing our stories, it is true that actually certainly as a woman, I feel that if I say to a man, I don't know how to do this, he's going to go, don't worry, I'll show you how. Yes. And really, you want to feel like you're with peers who understand you and have been in the same place and are like, yeah, I didn't know how to do that either, so this is what you need to do. Yeah,
definitely. And for any men who might have offended, it's on November the 19th. It happens every year. It's International Men's Day, and I'll be celebrating that one too as well. So
we should celebrate everybody every day. But absolutely. There we go. I'm going to move on to some of the questions that we've started to get through from our listeners. If you've got a question, please do pop it in Q&A. I will try and have a little look through the chat because I think I've seen a few, but do give us a hand and put them on the Q&A bit, and we'd love to have some more. So Rachel has asked, how do I help ladies get laptops in their cells? I'm about to be working within the Staffordshire Reconnect programme, and I believe Drake Hall may be on the radar.
Okay, yeah, great prison, Drake Hall, actually. Some really good stuff going on there. So what I would do is I would get in touch with whoever is the lead for their digital, whatever I said it was, let me just have a look, their digital program. So I would speak to them, if you ring up, in fact, I'm just thinking, if you ring up a prison, they won't give you anybody's names, but you need to find out who is their lead for their digital data and technology strategy, and they would be the first person within that prison that you need to go to. I think Drake Hall might already have laptops in their cells, because it's nearly open conditions, but have a look for that person, who the digital data and technology lead is. And if you can't find them, come back to me. I'm more than happy for my email to be shared, and you can come back to me and I'll try and assist you with that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kate. Again, if I could say to Ellie, if you wouldn't mind just putting Kate's email in the chat, that would be fantastic. Thank you for that offer, Kate. David Newman has asked, so you were talking about online sessions earlier on, What techniques did you use to find out reactions in an online session? Was it small groups, mini surveys, private chats, icebreakers, viewing an individual in full screen? What did you find worked best?
All of the above. So I think all of the above, really, and I think it very much depends kind of what you're delivering, really. So if you're delivering a domestic violence session, you know, around domestic abuse and awareness of domestic abuse, we're aware that there is going to be, you know, much more heightened emotions. So, you know, we try and have the capacity for people to be able to give us a nod, and we'll take them out to a breakout room where a member of staff will be able to provide some form of emotional support. All of that stuff, I think, definitely trying to look at an individual in full screen, just being able to read body language. So I think we've tried all of those, and if anybody's got any extra ones, please let us know, because we will continue to try, and it very much depends on what we're delivering at any given time. And also there's that whole thing with group dynamics, isn't there? You know what I mean? So you can be doing everything great one week, and then somebody new will come in, and everything that worked the previous week doesn't work at all, really.
Fantastic, thank you. And Jade says, are there any self-directed training courses which are made available to prisoners to help them with digital literacy? And then they just need to be shown how to access the training and can learn from there. If not, perhaps there's some digital advocates on the call who could help.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting, and I think somebody in the chat, I think it was James from Coracle, and they do supply laptops in prisons, and I think I've worked quite closely with Kathy Beach from Coracle to look at laptops and how they're implemented in prisons. I think it very much depends, Jade, on kind of the prison and what's available. Like I say, you'd like to think it's uniform and it happens all the way across the estate, but it doesn't. I would think if you are a digital advocate and you are looking at delivering and would be able to offer some support, again, get in touch with that digital data and technology lead to see what they could, to see if they're taking volunteers, what that might, what that mean. You know, unfortunately, doing any kind of volunteering in prison involves some god awful prison vetting and barring. You know, it seems to take longer than your standard DBS. But I would say if there are people who want to help, go for it.
There's an endless supply of people who need support, and there are always routes to volunteer skills if you are keen. Do keep questions coming, because we've got a little bit more time running. Rachel has also come back to ask about availability of this kind of support to men. Kate, I don't know whether that's something you'd be able to touch on.
Yeah, would imagine it is. I don't know, because I don't work with any. So, but I would be stunned if there wasn't. So I know that even with the digital rollout in men's prisons, it went to the men's estate first. So yeah, I would be amazed if it didn't happen. And I know particularly around mental health, there are lots and lots of stuff going on with men's projects now because of the high rates of suicide for men in the general population. So there's all kinds of really good things. I think they have this thing called men's sheds, don't they? Where kind of men get together and do something practical and kind of try and talk about some of the stuff. Women are much kind of better at talking therapies than men, you know, but there's loads of stuff going on. So I'd be amazed if there wasn't. I would say hit Google and see what there is out there. If you have access to a laptop to be able to use, to be able to do that.
And doesn't that just betray what we say all the time? We'll just look it up online, which not everybody can.
Yes.
We have, so Digital Poverty Alliance has been working on a scheme called Protect Prison Leavers, which has been focusing on male prison leavers exclusively, and we're hoping to then be able to, in a few months' time, mirror that in female prisons. And what we have found, and we do not claim to be the experts in this, we're the experts around digital poverty, but not around people in prison. But what we have seen is that it's very mixed in terms of men leaving prison, the access that they've been able to have, the amount of security and locking down, making access to online materials actually really quite difficult, and definitely not leaving prison with the skills that they need to then be able to, whether it's find work or connect with family or really do anything else online, to be honest. But we will be publishing our white paper around that later on in the year, and we are always keen to hear from people who want to learn from that or share in that or even partner with us around this piece of work. David's come back with a further question. Do older women need different kinds of support?
Yeah, I would say so. I think just like younger women need different types of support, older women need different types of support. I think definitely when we're talking about kind of education and employment, we're often talking about women who have never had a job or have never had a job that required the use of any technology. So there is definitely a real fear around some of that. So I think in terms of support, both practical and emotional support, yeah, there's probably a little bit, there is different support that's needed for different cohorts.
And one of our guests from Scotland has said, what are the main barriers or challenges you see, particularly around skills and abilities?
It's a really interesting one. I mean, I think fear and motivation, you know, as you keep talking about, Elizabeth, that motivation, I think fear is a huge factor. You already have a group of women who feel who have low self-esteem, low self-confidence, and feel isolated, obviously digitally excluded. So I think, you know, for most people, it's getting over that fear and then being able to get the right support at the right time, you know, to kind of work across some of that fear and being able to get people, you know, people kind of gird themselves and decide they need it's kind of almost like coming off drugs, you know, you want, when you decide you want to come off drugs, you want to come off drugs that week. You don't want to go on a waiting list for 12 weeks. Anything could happen in 12 weeks. And it's the same kind of when you're trying to make those decisions around ETE and where you're going with that. I do. Can I just, sorry, Elizabeth, I just noticed that there's a question in there around online CBT, self-help therapy. And yes, I have heard of it. One of our women's centres, it's not our women's centres, but it's a partners women's centre in Stockport in Cheshire. They deliver online CBT. And I'm really honest, you know, this is pre-pandemic. I was a little bit sceptical about it and thought, oh, because we must do everything face to face. And actually, I'm completely sold. It's brilliant. So many women accessing it, so many women preferring to do that kind of online CBT in their own time and space and work through it. So I'm sold. I have heard of it and it's brilliant.
Great to hear. And actually, that leads on to a question that we've had from Karen Back, who is working on a health tech tool for custody suites to improve healthcare. Do you think that's the kind of thing that could be helpful?
I think, you know, yeah. Well, I mean, it's not going to be not helpful, is it? That's what I always think. I think any kind of attention that's given to kind of a certain cohort of people, and that cohort, be it men or women, you know, are vulnerable and marginalised. I'm not suggesting, you know, that that people haven't committed terrible crimes, and sometimes they have done, but sometimes people can be victims and perpetrators too. And you know, there's different types of exclusion. So yeah, I would say I think anything you know, that adds and can bring people in, that can help organisations and statutory organisations do their work better and work more effectively with people, and anything that provides a service for their cohorts is really good. And for us, what we have found is that hybrid model works. Not everybody wants to come back. You know, everybody wants to come to the Women's Centre and work, but actually, no, they don't. So, you know, anything that you can do, I think, brings value.
Fantastic. And I also feel like this, the creation of those kinds of tools that can be used should drive interest in learning about digital. I usually say very few people wake up one morning and go, I'm going to learn to use the internet today.
Yeah.
But they want to learn actually how to do a thing, whether that's, you know, find recipes online or find out more about their healthcare online. Actually, digital is a facilitator. It's not an end in itself.
That's right, Elizabeth. And also just having sort of read through the chat, you know, lots of people doing some really exciting stuff there, people setting up new services. And there was somebody who's a lived experience worker who's setting up something around liaison and diversion, lots of stuff. I would say speak to people, you know, speak to the people who you're going to be delivering that service for. You know, we all kind of fall prey. I mean, it's my role as like I say, you know, my role is head of participation. So it's about how we co-produce services, and actually the people who access your services are the best people to help you design your services. And sometimes doing that stuff is really hard work. Much easier to sit in your office and design what you think is going to be a great program because you have that kind of digital expertise, but actually speak to those people who are going to be accessing those services, and they'll soon tell you there are no doubts about what they need and how they need it and how it should be delivered. So I would say go and speak to those people. You know, it's harder work, but you know, the benefits come from that, not just for you, but for those people, just immense, really.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's been such an inspiring session. I hope that all of our participants have enjoyed hearing from you. I certainly have, so I really hope that everybody else has felt as inspired as I do. If you are not familiar with the DPA, I would take this opportunity to say, do visit our website, digitalpovertyalliance.org. Do join our hub, continue these conversations. There's some great people on here today doing some fantastic work. So do continue those conversations on the DPA Community Hub. Do also look up Women in Prison. Find out more about what they're doing. They are a truly fantastic organisation. We are delighted to be connected to them. Really, really grateful, Kate, for your time today. I'm going to put my LinkedIn in the chat because I'd love to be in touch with as many of you as possible. And I know that Ellie did very kindly share Kate's email as well. So I suspect Kate is going to have a bit of a full inbox as she comes away from this. She's going to regret having made that offer. This session has also been recorded, so we'll be sharing that later on as well. But in the meantime, Kate, I would just like to give you the opportunity to give us your closing thoughts on whether you think there's any particular actions that you'd love people to take as they leave here today.
I would say, yeah, I mean, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me today. It just seems right that it's International Women's Day, so thank you so much. And it's been really great looking at the chat and seeing how far afield people are coming from to log on and listen to us today. So thank you so much. I would say for a call to action, I would say find out where your local women's centres are. You know, find out what they do. Find out what they're offering to people and find out, you know, if there's any way that you can support them. You know, they work holistically across a huge range of issues, you know, mental health, substance misuse, homelessness, that sometimes, you know, digital access and resources and knowledge around that can fall to the bottom of the list when we're dealing with people in crisis. But actually, it's really integral. Like I say, it's survival. So any, you know, even if it's not your time, if it's resources, if you've got, you know, anything around that, any information, you know, find out, because your local women's centre will want to do that. They'll have your arm off at the elbow, I would imagine. And secondly, I would say have a look at our website. We are a campaigning organisation. Have a look at the section around campaigns. I think most people aren't aware of you know, the very real kind of underlying needs of why women end up in prison in the first place and what that cohort of women are experiencing. Just go on our website, have a look, you know, and tell somebody else. That's what you can all do. Ask somebody else to go and have a look at our website. Thank you.
There we go. Great advocacy. I hope everybody here has a fantastic International Women's Day ahead. Celebrate us, women. We are fantastic. We do make the world go round. But also don't forget to don't just celebrate women on International Women's Day. Celebrate women every day. Thank you all so much for coming. See you again soon, I hope.